Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow. Why, oh, why can't...
During my professional experience, I worked for several architectural firms. I kind of selected the firms I wanted to work for and gain certain types of experience. JoAnn's mother asked her one day, she said, "Can't Jim hold a job? He's had been three different firms in the last 4 years." And JoAnn explained to her what transpired. But I worked for one firm, Marshall & Brown, and we did a lot of schools. I worked there a couple of years and enjoyed the people. Great Christian gentleman, Marshall & Brown. And then I went upstairs to Kivett & Myers, which was probably the most prestigious firm in the city, very modern. And they won a lot of awards with their building designs and so forth. And it was there that I was a project architect on the theater in the Command and General Staff School. This is a school that was created to educate generals from all over the world. They could accommodate all sorts of battle equipment on the stage, and they had a deep stage. And then the theater was designed to be fly 52 sets up in the gallery, so they could have a road show of Oklahoma or something there. The Major Washko we worked with had some background experience in shows, so he was well gifted about what it took to build a theater like that. And see, the purpose of the theater was not only to show the people that were at the performance, but we had closed circuit TV to the classrooms, so they could be giving demonstrations on battle tactics and that sort of thing. So it was very interesting, and really my first experience in theater design. And from there I had an opportunity to do some motion picture theaters, and that's what really helped me in my work later in my own practice. Avila College, I moved on to another architectural firm. One of the partners of this first firm opened his own office, and I had been working with him on this new college, Avila College. It was a 40-acre cornfield that we first were given, and we developed 5-6 buildings, classrooms, dormitories, student center, academic library. And it was very interesting. I was able to design the first 4 buildings there and helped with the master plan. I was influenced by Foothills College in California, but that didn't come to pass. So this was a very modern brick type structures, but it was very interesting. And I enjoyed working with the Sisters of Loretto on that. And that's when I left that firm and opened my own practice. I met George Lund, my partner, and we had a lot of things of common and interests and so forth, and ideals, and we had never worked together, but we had been friends through the years at social functions and YMCA and so forth. So we opened our own practice in 1965. First few weeks we were in our garage and kind of roughing it. We were fortunate, we had a project, a large retirement facility, and we had a dentist's office and some other things that fell in. And we established our office in Lenexa, Kansas with my uncle. This is a industrial area, and we had a joint office where we had one side and Don and my cousin Ron had the other side, and we had a joint reception and shared some of the same equipment and so forth. And George and I were there 5 or 6 years, and then we decided we wanted to move in to Overland Park and expand our practice. We had been doing a lot of fire stations and police stations and churches and then a little background of industrial work, but we decided we wanted to move into maybe another venue. So we moved into a rental office in an apartment project, and we had a staff of 8 or 10, and that was very interesting. We moved from there, we bought our own building, and we moved about 4,000 square feet, and we two-story building in downtown Overland Park. And we moved there and expanded our offices, and we got into doing some college work and some more city government type stuff and so forth. And we were in practice for 35 years, I believe, and it was a great experience. And George you couldn't ask for a better partner. In fact, George grew up in Independence, Missouri, and he delivered former President Harry Truman's newspaper. And he tells the tale of one day Harry Truman called and he said, "George, would you mind not throwing the paper on the roof of our house? Mrs. Truman has trouble getting up there and getting it down." And George said, "Okay, I'll oblige." And George also said that when he quit delivering the paper to Truman's, the guy owed him about $2 or $3, and he never did get that. But anyhow, that was our experience with Independence #1 citizen, Harry Truman. In fact, when I was working downtown one day, I walked across the intersection, and Harry Truman was out of the White House and had an office downtown, and he was walking across the street, and he said, "Good morning there." And I said, "Oh, good morning, Mr. President." And he's a very friendly, outgoing person. And I think he's probably regarded one of our outstanding presidents. In fact, Mr. Truman saved probably my life and all my shipmates' lives by ordering the bomb to be dropped in Japan. JoAnn's and my marriage was flourishing. We had a great few years, and then we decided we wanted to have a family. So Joy was born in '57 and in May. And so we were at the hospital with Joy and JoAnn, and they had a tornado hit Grandview, Missouri, and it was pretty bad. And they brought a lot of the victims into the hospital, and they put them on beds in the halls and so forth. So our happiness was kind of overshadowed by this tornado that harmed a lot of people. And of course, the first child is always spoiled or overloved, and I think Joy was a special child, and her grandparents and both sides were very loving towards her, especially JoAnn's folks, since they lived here locally. And Joy called them Bommy and Poppy, so they were special. She was special in that way. Then Jill came along in '59, and She too was a special, loved child, and she was a blonde, and she was something else. She was a little different than Joy in what her likes and dislikes, and which was good. Jill was, I remember one year Jill wanted, for Easter, she wanted a pink purse and a baseball glove, so. And then we had great family Christmases, and the girls got a lot of gifts. And I remember one year especially, Jill wanted a Playmobil, and I don't know if you know what a Playmobil was, but she saw that under the Christmas tree and just was delighted, and her sister thought it was hers, and Jill was real upset that she wasn't going to get that. But one of our Christmases, Jill needed a bicycle. So bicycles were expensive, and our income was a little limited, so we found a good used bicycle. It had a scratch on it, and when I pumped up the tire that night, it blew out. So next day at Christmas, Jill got her bicycle, but she said, well, it's got a scratch on it. And I said, well, Santa Claus must have done that, bring it down the chimney. Well, it's also got a flat tire. And I felt so bad. So the next day we went out and bought Jill a new bicycle. And we sent the other one back to Santa Claus. So, anywho. But JoAnn had two aunts that were very loving. JoAnn was the only child in her family, and then the girls were the only grandchildren. So the two aunts were very loving and did a lot of things for us. We were very grateful. But that the girls growing up was a wonderful experience. As far as names, I grew up as Jimmy Balderson, and I was Charles James, and my father was Charlie. So I was called Jimmy. When Jill and Joy came along, we named Joy after our good friend Joy Bates, who was been a long time friend. And then we picked out the name Jill, and we needed another name, so we named her Mary Jill. Well, she went by Jill, but one day she came into the house when she was, 3 or 4, and she was very upset. She said, her name was Jill, and her sister said that her name was Mary. And she said, I'm not Mary, I'm Jill. So JoAnn had to soothe her tears. And Jacobs was JoAnn's maiden name, and her Louis Jacobs and Ann were her mother and father. And they were very loving and helpful in our first years of marriage, and with the kids and so forth, and I really appreciated that. JoAnn's mother was a little hard to live with sometimes, but we were too, so I accepted that. But no, they were very, and we were very fortunate. I was very fortunate to have them as in-laws. And JoAnn's dad had retired, at 65. He had worked for Purina as a regional salesperson down in Independence, Kansas. And they moved back to Kansas City, and he came out of retirement to go in the clothing business. And he worked at Jack Henry's which is a fine gentleman's clothing store on the plaza till he was 75 going on 80. And the only reason he retired because Jack Henry's was bought by Sharpheimer and Marx. And they had mandatory retirement at 70, but he looked like Hathaway, very distinct, and he was an excellent clothing salesman. We lived on Canterbury. We moved to Canterbury to this modified contemporary California type house shortly after Jill was born. And then we moved west into another house, but Jill and Joy went to Somerset School, And it was close by, and it was had some wonderful, loving teachers there, and both of them flourished there. They did very well. And JoAnn was the president of the PTA there. That's usually what I said. That it's probably the squarest broad in town gets that job. I said, cut.
I remember two activities we used to do when I was growing up. Every once in a while we'd have a nice snowstorm. And in Kansas City, when we lived on Canterbury, which was a big hill, and my dad would take us out late at night, and we would climb on the sled. It was one of the wood and metal ones. My dad would be on the bottom, laying down, and my sister lying on top of him, and then me on the top. And we would fly down that street, and it was a good block long, and somehow we survived. We never fell off. Every once in a while we'd hit a dry patch of the street and see sparks with the metal runners, but it was fun.
Well, in our home on Canterbury, we had I added a carport and a courtyard, and we had a gas barbecuer there. And one evening, I used to do most of the cooking. One evening, JoAnn decided to cook a pound of bacon on the grill before I got home. And of course, you can imagine what happened on the barbecue. The thing flared up, and I think JoAnn opened the lid and caught the bushes on fire and tried to burn the house down, but didn't succeed. But it wasn't scary, but it was remembered.
And then I also remember my dad taking us trick-or-treating. He had a red flannel nightshirt that he would wear and this ugly old mask. And we would go around the neighborhood, and that would be his costume.
My father passed on in '63. He had, Dad was 59, and he had took early retirement at the post office. He had heart failure, and so he passed on, and I had to help my mother do a lot of things and so forth. But she was well prepared. She had started and going back to school and learning to type and all that bit, and then, but that was quite a shock to us. And but my brother John was a great companion and comfort to my mother, and so they did well. George and I opened our office in '65, and we both became active, tried to become active in the community. I was appointed to the Prairie Village Planning Commission and became city architect. And I also was serving in the downtown YMCA as chairman of the board of managers. And I was also got involved with the registration board, Kansas Registration Board, and was appointed by 3 governors for terms on that board for registration and licensing of architects. This is a period of time when we both tried to get involved. George was very active in the Kansas City chapter of the American Institute of Architects, and so we were busy not only maintaining our practice and trying to develop clients, but taking care of our families, and then trying to give back to the community and so forth. But it was a fun time. We enjoyed what we were doing. We had some friends from Maryland whose son came out to K-State to play football, and they were members of our church, and we enjoyed their friendship. They had 2 daughters and a son, Kenny, and so we went back to Washington, D.C. for a National Architects meeting, and they invited us to join them, come visit them, and they had this GMC motorhome. And so they took us down to Williamsburg, and we had a great time. They had a pig by the name of Arnold that used to walk around the house like a pet until he walked through the storm door one day, and then Arnold got put out in the barn. But They didn't have a farm, they had like a zoo, the son said so. But it was a great, great family. And Dig DeGarmo and his sisters later became clients of ours. George and I did a project for them in North Kansas City and Office Park. But we've been friends through the years. But they would come out for their sons' football games with their GMC. And about that time, George and I bought a GMC, a beautiful motorhome. And so we would follow each other up to Manhattan, and we'd tailgate together. And one time, the DeGarmos were leading the way, and of course they had a pass since their son played football. Would park their car or their motorhome, and we were following behind and went through the gate, and the young man said, "No, you can't come in here, you don't have a pass." And for some reason I said, "But we have the dialysis machine, we have to be with them." "Oh, yes, sir," he said. And he pointed us in, and we parked right next to them and had our tailgate party. You're allowed to tell 2 or 3 lies in your lifetime, I guess. But one year we went to California with the DeGarmos. They had their motorhome and we had ours, and we followed them out to California. And they were going up the coast to Northern California, and we went down to Southern California. And we were, Jill had a friend out there that we were supposed to meet up with, and that never happened. We spent the evening with our motorhome in a car wash, and we'll get even. But we had a beautiful trip in California, wonderful state, and we enjoyed it very much. That was in '76. This friend of Jill's came back to visit us, coming through, and this is funny. He and his friend came back to visit us, and we didn't know them from Adam, so they could stay with us, but we suggested they sleep in our motor home on the driveway. This was in July, and it was rather warm, and the second night we allowed them to come into the house and the lower level in their sleeping bags, I guess. Both the girls attended Shawnee Mission South High School, and Joy was active in art and choir and was National Honor Society a couple of years, and Jill was on the swimming team that won the state title. So both girls were excellent students and excellent in we felt in their participation in active school activities and so forth. And we encouraged them. I enjoyed getting up at 5:30 in the morning, taking Jill to swimming practice in the snow. I mean, that's what fathers are for. Joy had graduated from high school in '75. And her choir, she was active in her choir, the Chanticleer, and they joined with a choir from Wichita, and they flew to Europe, and they had a beautiful 2-week trip there, and they sang in some cathedrals in Switzerland and France and Germany. And then they went on to England, and they had sang in a choir there in a concert. And it was a wonderful trip for her, and she took lots of slides which she shared with us. And then the following week, that fall, she started her academics at Kansas State. And surprise to me, she was influenced by some friends of ours in Manhattan who were architects, Bill and Patricia Edson. So Joy decided she wanted to be an interior architect. So she enrolled in the School of Architecture and chose that course. Jill graduated in '77, and Jill had an experience in Mexico. She was an exchange student with a family in Mexico City. And she had taken Spanish in high school, and then her experience in Mexico City, she enrolled in the School of Fine Arts and majored in Spanish. So that was her chosen academic choice. We had an exchange student from Brazil, and the past president was supposed to house her for the year, and his wife decided they didn't want to, so they asked if I would do it, and I said yeah, and so I forgot to tell JoAnn that we were having a guest for a few months until just a week before, and she was to share Joy's room and with Jill, and anyway, Lucilia came, and she couldn't speak English. So we met her at the airport with some other Rotarians and brought her home, and JoAnn took her to supermarket to help her with her English. She identified food products and so forth, and she was a sweet little gal. She was 15. Her father was a doctor in Brazil, and she had some money, and we took her to a savings and loan, and they gave her this wool blanket, and so she thought every place she'd go in the United States that she would receive something. But it was a wonderful experience. I don't think in school she became more acquainted with other foreign exchange students, and I think that's kind of natural sometimes. And she and Jill just didn't have the same interests, and Joy was away at college, so it was an interesting time. Lucilia left us after 5 or 6 months and moved on to a Chinese-American doctor and his family. And he was a little more strict than I was. Lucilia wanted to stay out with her other exchange student friends to 1 o'clock one time, and I said, no, you have to be home at 12. And she said, well, my Brazilian father would let me stay out late. And I said, your American father says in at 12. So she was very mindful, but she was a beautiful girl. It was a wonderful experience for us. And she went on to become a pediatrician. And we hear from her every 4 or 5 years, and she's got married a few years ago, and they're starting to start their family. But well, both girls went to Kansas State University. I told them they could go to any school in the country, but I'd pay their way to K-State. So that was my alma mater. And JoAnn's alma mater was the University of Kansas, our bitter rival. So the girls went to K-State, and Jill enrolled in the College of Fine Arts and chose the Spanish career, and Joy was in the interior architecture department. And we really went away to college with our girls because we spent football weekends up there every weekend, and so we had a chance to be with the girls and meet their friends and see how they were doing and so forth. And then they would come home on occasion. One year the lightning struck our house. We had a metal flue, and it hit that and went down through the girls' bathroom and then down and hit the electrical panel, and I don't think the strike awakened Jill, but it shook JoAnn and I. JoAnn grabbed her credit cards and purse and headed for the front door, and about the time 9/11 was called and the firemen approached, and I went down to ask them, or to tell them what to do, and they just pushed me aside and said, we'll take care of this. So they brought their ladders and canvas and fans in, and they did a good job, but saved the house. It did minor damage. We were working on the Lenexa police building, and we went to a seminar in Los Angeles for International Chiefs of Police Association, and we took our client, and we were there with about 20 or 30 other architects and their clients, and we were at this Japanese hotel, and JoAnn would periodically check on the girls. They were staying home that summer, and both of them had worked at Dairy Queen or Zarda's, or they were enjoyed working, eating all that ice cream, I guess. But Jill got on the phone and said she had met this great guy. Jill was working that summer at Colonial Savings, and she met Doug. And Jill said, I met this interesting person. He's got 2 cars in an apartment. And JoAnn turned to me and said, we better go home. But they soon became close friends and got engaged and eventually married. But Doug was a wonderful addition to our family, and he came into our family life at a good time, a good need. And he and Jill have been very supportive of JoAnn and I.
In twilight glow I see.
In '79, February of '79, our oldest daughter, Joy, passed on. She had an accident in the Kamega house, and she had a mishap in the bathtub. And that was quite a disaster for us. I mean, Joy had been having some health problems, but she was working with her science, and also we had visited some doctors and so forth. But I remember when we were informed that she had passed on, that I remember JoAnn said, well, we must go on, and so we did. And Joy had a wealth of friends, and we had her services at the chapel at Kansas State, and her sorority sisters, and she had a lot of friends. We had a reception there, and the college president's wife loaned us the university silver set, and we had a reception afterwards, and it was a beautiful service, Christian Science service. And it was quite a loss. In Joy's memory, we established a memorial scholarship and the Interior Architecture Department, and we've been involved in that, and I think there's been 24, 25 scholarships awarded the last few years. And then in the Kamega house, her friends and family donated money for a fountain, and this was a piece of sculpture that was created by the dean of the School of Sculpture at the K-State, and it was interesting in that this was a large piece that 4 or 5 foot tall, and had water flowing out of it, and I helped the sculptor install it, and we put it in some stainless steel basins that a contractor in Kansas City gave me, and this fountain was installed in the foyer where everybody could see it, and it's a beautiful piece, and it's something that Joy wanted to do. She did a survey of the house, and there were some planters that had artificial flowers, and she thought the idea of having something like a fountain or natural flowers there would be appropriate. This is what they call a manquette, or model of a piece of sculpture. Actually, this is about 4 or 5 foot tall, and the sculptor had presented several designs to us, and we selected, the people in the Kamega house selected this, and we thought it was very appropriate. So 3 students from K-State and the dean of the sculpture department went to KU, and their dean of the sculpture department and 3 of their students cast this. It was too large for the K-State's apparatus. So they cast this, and I went up and watched them. It's a bronze piece. And then this base that Joy, is supporting this, is something Joy did in class. And she's put some coins in there, and I still don't know what's in there, but I thought it was appropriate for that. But it is a beautiful piece of sculpture. And there are plans to move this out into their own courtyard at the house, and I'm sure that will be properly funded, but beautiful piece. So we installed this, and I would go up every fall and help clean it up and activate it and so forth. And we had a collection of rocks that we gathered on our family vacations, and these boulder type things, and we put all those in there, and it was a beautiful piece. And so she had a plaque in memory of Joy, and so she was remembered and still remembered, which is important.
You know our love was meant to be the kind of love to last forever. And I want you here with me from tonight until the end of time. You should know everywhere I go, always on my mind, in my heart, in my soul. Baby, you're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. Wanna have you near me. I wanna have you hear me say it. No one needs you more than I need you. Now I know that I need you here with me from tonight until the end of time. You should know everywhere I go, always on my mind, in my heart, in my soul. You're the meaning in my life. You're the inspiration. You bring feeling to my life. You're the inspiration. When you love somebody till the end of time. When you love somebody, always on my mind. I need you more than that. When you love somebody till the end of time.
Shortly after Joy passed on, JoAnn and I and Jill were struggling with her loss, and it was very difficult for us. In fact, it still is today to a degree, but I had a dream where I saw Joy and her grandfather Jacobs and grandfather Balderson, and they were running through a meadow. And I awoke and I had a demonstration of a healing. I didn't grieve anymore. I mean, to me that was tantamount to a understanding of what had transpired and where Joy was, and I was felt relieved, and it was a wonderful experience. In fact, I shared that with a close friend shortly after who had lost his grandson, and over the phone, and he cried on the phone, and he thanked me for relating that experience. And so that's always been with me, and so we coped, and I think we all have resolved our loss. But then in 1980, JoAnn and I went to Finland with a group of architects. And that was our first travel experience abroad, and we had a great time. Jill stayed home and looked after my partner's children, which was quite an experience for her. And so we had a great time. And then in '81, Jill graduated from K-State after 4 great years, and in her Kappa Delta sorority, and Doug and she were engaged, and he would go up to K-State for all the parties, and I think they had an enjoyable time. Jill graduated in June, and then a few weeks or later they got married, and beautiful wedding. And Doug's mother and grandmother and brother and sister were there, and sister-in-law, and all our friends and a few family members were there, and it was a wonderful occasion. They were married in the Country Club Christian Church, and that's where JoAnn's folks were members, and that's where we were married. The wedding and planning and everything fell together perfectly. Doug's mother had a nice reception for the bridal party at the Ritz Hotel. Used to be the Raphael. And so we got to meet the members of their bridal party, and some of them were friends, former friends of Doug's in school, and Jill's sorority sisters were also there, their bridesmaids and so forth, and her best, or lady-in-waiting, whatever. But it was a beautiful thing, and I remember taking Jill down the aisle, and I was so proud of her and her accomplishments, and what she had done, and what her future was to be, and so forth. And halfway down, I said, "Are you sure?" She said, "Yes, Dad." And so we went ahead and had a beautiful wedding. And then afterwards, we had a reception at the Leawood Country Club, and by my virtue of being on the alumni board, and I think, the dance band from K-State, Matt Benton, who was a longtime friend of mine, and Larry Weigel, who was our executive director, they came down and played at Jill's reception. And one of my KU friends commented he didn't realize that he was going to come to a K-State pep rally. I put on my purple bow tie, and we sang the K-State fight song, and I think Doug's mother kind of stood over there and kind of wondered what was going on, but we had a great time. In 1983, I was asked to submit a design for a cinema, a group in Milton Keynes, England, for an international competition, and by Stan Durwood of AMC, who was a close friend of mine. And so we designed a cinema block for the entertainment center, and in competition with Arthur Rank and UCI and some other UK cinema developers. And I traveled over there in '83 and to look at the site and to talk with the British. We joint ventured with Bass Ale, and that was an interesting experience. They knew how to make beer, but they didn't know how to run an entertainment center, so anywho. But JoAnn and I went over there in '84. Stan Durwood suggested that maybe we'd like to go over and look at England, and with the thought of maybe going over there for 2 or 3 years. And JoAnn was elated, being a ex-English teacher, and I thought it would be interesting. In the meantime, Doug and Jill had moved from Leawood, Kansas to Hollywood, Florida, and Doug was president of a mortgage company there, I believe, and they were there just a few months, and I don't think they cared for the Florida lifestyle and the way of doing business and so forth. So a headhunter found Doug, and so they relocated, and he went to work with MGIC as the director of operations, I believe. And so they moved to Wisconsin. And '85, we moved to England, so we both left the Kansas City area about the same time. And we moved to England early '85. I went early. In March, I had to resign my position on the registration board and my position as regional director of NCARB. We moved to London, and we located in Shakespeare Tower, which is a 40-story, one of 3 40-story towers there in England. I think at that time they were the largest or tallest tower blocks in Europe. And I went over early and I looked at 30 or 40 apartments, and then when JoAnn came over, she looked at another 10 or 15, and the one I originally had suggested we rent was the one that she agreed to live in. And this was in a development center called the Barbican, and they had a library, an art gallery, and a museum, and a concert hall, and the Shakespeare Theater group met there, and it was just a wonderful place to live. And it was very cold and insensitive. This project had been started, must have been 1975, and they had a industrial action or a strike over there for 5 years, but they developed into all these high-rise and low-rise and all these facilities, and had to arborate them, and it was a nice place to live. And it was the British thought it was kind of a cold design, being ribbed concrete and so forth, but we liked it. We had a beautiful flat there that was glass on 2 sides and a balcony running around, and 3 bedrooms, and a nice facility. We lived there for 4 years. I think I went over there for 2 years and stayed 4. But we had a wonderful experience there. And what I did, I was working for AMC, helping select sites and do feasibility studies, and then I hired British engineers and architects to work on the projects. And while I was there, I was working on about 40 projects. It took 16 months to build a project there, where in the United States we could do one in 6 months. So there was quite a logistics problem, but we had good people working with us, and we had a few battles along the way, but the British persevered and let me get the job done. And we made some good friends. And we did a lot of traveling. I'd have meetings in Spain or Italy or France, and say on Thursday, and then JoAnn and I'd spend 3 or 4 day weekend on the continent. And we made some good friends over there and saw a lot of sights and really enjoyed it. And then in England itself, we belonged to a British American Society, and we met other Americans that were working over there, and we entered into being an expatriate and enjoying all the British cultural activities and so forth. So it was a wonderful experience for us. And even though I did battles during the week, we had fun weekends, and it was quite an experience. Our first project was the Milton Keynes, and that was the first multi-cinema built in Europe, and I designed that and took pride in that, and we followed it through to construction, and then that followed with our second one was up at Newcastle, and that was very difficult up there, because you go to different parts of the UK, and the climate is always different as far as the working climate, as far as working with people and what their venue is and what their restrictions and rules and regs are. I remember one day I went up to Newcastle on the train, and I was having a particularly bad day. Came away from the meeting, all-day meeting, and felt that we just hadn't achieved anything. And I was very dejected. And riding back to the station in the cab, we went by this butcher shop. And I looked out the window and there was a big metal tray there, and it had about 9 or 10 hogs' heads. They had just been slaughtered, and they had the head sitting there. They make head cheese out of them or something. And all the heads were there, and one of them had a smile on his face. And I said, well, I guess I didn't have the bad day after all. And this guy here cheered me up. I started laughing, and the taxi cab driver said, Governor, what are you laughing at? And I said, I just had quite a healing or a demonstration here. So, anywho, but we enjoyed our trip over there very much. And I was a worker and JoAnn was a tourist. She was off with her friends and seeing everything, and I could do that on the weekends, or she could relate to me. But it was a great experience for us. And then Doug and Jill came over a couple of times and joined us, and we went to Scotland, and they all got to play golf up there, and I walked in the rain with them, and we went to that was at Glen Eagles, and that's where Tom Watson, the Kansas City golfer, won a couple of British Opens and so forth, and he was very popular over there. And another time, Doug and Jill came over and we went to Copenhagen, and we had a beautiful trip there. That was where the Japanese tourists always bugged me. I mean, they were all over you and everywhere, and they would have all these cameras strapped on them, and they were always talking, and you couldn't hear. If you were on a tour in a church, the Japanese were in there making all this noise. So we were standing by the rock there that had the maiden of the rock or whatever, and the two Japanese come and said, "Take picture." So they wanted me to take their picture, so I took their picture, but I cut their heads off. And I can imagine they went home and said, "American bad photographer." But I had 3 or 4 occasions to do that later, and I enjoyed that. That was my rebuttal to World War II, I guess. I had another experience over there in Hanover Square one day. I was surrounded by Japanese sailors. They got off this bus, and I hadn't seen Japanese sailors since World War II, and they were shooting at us and vice versa. And I was kind of in a state of shock. I sat down on the bench and kind of composed myself and so forth. So we had a lot of interesting things happen to us over there. But the British were very friendly and very helpful, and we met our friends, the Baldersons, who were introduced to us from Balderson from Wamego, Kansas. And they were very hospitable towards us, and she was a doctor and he was a scientist. And they showed us about, and we stayed at their home on occasion and met their family and so forth. And we really enjoyed them. And that's where I got into genealogy. I think John Balderson kind of helped me and led us to do some things. And so that really got us started on that. But we had a wonderful experience there. And when we left, of course, I worked for greatest boss in the world, Stan Durwood. He was very supportive and encouraging and a man of vision. And he'd been a friend for 30 years. And my company, London Balderson, had done several projects for him. When we left, he said, "Why don't you and JoAnn take a 10-day trip somewhere on the company?" So we did. We went to Spain and Majorca and had a great time. But Stan used to say about the British, World War II was over in '43, but it took the British 2 years to finish the paperwork.
We had this wonderful opportunity to live abroad. Jill and Doug had been married for 4 years and lived in a house in Leawood, not too far from us, and that was wonderful. And then he had this opportunity to move to Milwaukee and live up there, and it was at the exact same time that we were moving to England. So the transition wasn't so hard for her. And I thought that was good. So as my friend said, how can you do this? How can you move so far away, another country? And I just thought it would be so exciting because after all, I'd been an English teacher, and to live in England and walk in the footsteps of all those great people and that I'd been teaching about. So it worked out as a beautiful experience. And he really enjoyed it, and he learned much, you know. It was great. But I joined the American Women's Club, and in the large cities around the world, they have this organization for wives or women in business who are living abroad, and they can make contact with other Americans. And they have all sorts of performances and trips and things that you can take together. And it was just so nice. And I made good friends then, and then their husbands met Jim, and we did a lot of things, went to nice restaurants and traveled together. And then we went to cultural things. Jim didn't want to miss a single thing. We went to art museums, art shows, plays, concerts. And living in the Barbican, of course, we had the opportunity to see so many things because they had this two marvelous auditoriums there, and it was the home of the London Symphony. So there was always something right there. There were three 40-some story towers, tall towers, stories. And we lived in Shakespeare Tower on the 19th floor.
While in England, I expanded my professional career. I set for and passed the ARCUC, or the Architect's licensing for the United Kingdom, and then subsequently I became a member of the Royal Institute of British Architects, which I thought was quite an honor and achievement. And also affiliated with the London Rotary Club, which was a great experience. And they put me on a Go Fly the Kite committee, or they wanted to send me to the leper colony in Africa, put me on that committee, and I said, I don't think so. But we had a great time in England, and we enjoyed the cultural amenities there, art, music, literature, and it was a great experience. Working with the British construction industry was quite revealing. One time we had to do some remedial work on the side of the building, and I suggested to the contractor that he remove the whole side of this building because the insulation wasn't properly installed. So they did that, and he submitted photographs showing proof that they were doing it. And so at the meeting I looked at the photographs and I said, look at this lad here. He's mooning you. And he was shocked to see this photograph where the worker was mooning I guess the American architects or American client. But we had a good experience with them over there. It did take a little longer, construction-wise, for them to do their work, but it was a difficult situation moving a total new industry into a country like that, because our materials and methods were different, and our designs, and but toward the end we were able to achieve what we sought out to.
It's hard to describe because it was so marvelous to be able to see these performers and to hear the performances in the concerts and the plays, just all of the cultural events. We didn't miss a thing. We went to everything. I don't think we missed much at all, really. And he liked to go to art galleries and so on. And then I went to special classes at all of the galleries, because I'd been a docent at the Nelson Gallery here in Kansas City for 13 years. So when I went over, I had a great interest in seeing all of the galleries and seeing the museums and what they had. And they had special programs all the time. You could go and you could take classes. And I came back with books and books of notes, you know. It was marvelous, since I'd had a background in that, to be able to further it.
We had all these premiere openings at all the cinemas that we opened over there. And one of them we had Eddie the Eagle, which is a famous, he was Britain's first ski jump champion in the Olympics. And he was hired. We did the Cristo Peak Shopping Center, and he was hired to go up high in the roof. It had a big atrium, and come down this cable with his skis and land in front of the cinema. Well, he got halfway down and he got caught up there. And they had to bring a fire truck in and go up and get him, and it was turned into much more entertainment than we thought, but it was funny.
One of the really fun and exciting things for us as Americans was to see the Royals, and I don't mean the baseball team, the English Royals in person and up close. And we were able to do that a number of times. I had a couple of friends, American women who lived over there, who were royal watchers. And they knew when the Royals were going to be, where they were going to be. They make all these appearances, you know, and they're just there for the public to see them. And so we did. We would go downstairs to a concert in the Barbican, and if I knew that Prince Charles was going to be there, I would know where to stand, and when he made his corner here to turn to go in here, I was there and I could see him in the face and he would smile at me. In fact, one time we were at one of their famous racehorses where we were sitting in the Queen's seating area, and we had to wear the women had to wear hats and the men had to wear morning suits. That's gray tails with a gray top hat. So here's Jim in this gray top hat, you know, and he's so big anyway. So we're standing on the curb waiting for the Royals to horse their cars to come up, and then they would get out. And a friend of mine who's a doctor over there, a lady, told me exactly where to stand, and I could see them as they got out. If you stand over there, you can't see them because they turn this way, you know that. And so there was another little lady came along, and she's much shorter than I, and I said, now if we stand here, we can see them getting out of their limos. And just as they drove up, a big bobby came along and stood in front of her. Not in front of me, but in front of her. She was completely blocked out. She couldn't move, she couldn't see a thing. I felt so sorry for her. But anyway, as Prince Charles got out of the car and he turned to look right at me, he doffed his hat to me. And I turned around, Jim was behind me, and he saw it, and he went, you know. Well, that was a big thrill. But we saw all of them. Princess Di, of course. That was fun, see all of them. Being over there with Jim and having him involved so in the architecture and meeting such interesting people as he did in his business, and then following the Royals and getting involved in things was just so exciting, mainly because Jim enjoyed that too. So many of the other American women's husbands were there to work and play golf. Period. And I felt so fortunate to have a husband who really wanted to partake of this culture, which I was so enthusiastic about. It made the whole experience just wonderful.
Shortly after we came back, he sold the company. They were having some problems here, and he sold their holdings over there for, I think, 250 million pounds. And he made a good profit. When we left, they had a surprise party at the American club. And I had called and tried to talk to all my architects I worked with, Ian Bell and Alex Stevenson, and none of them were in the office that day. And I thought, what's going on? These people are never in the office. They're supposed to be working on our projects. And so that evening, JoAnn had enticed me to go to the American Club for supposed to be a quiet dinner with another American couple, but I was supposed to wear a black tie affair. And I thought, But my secretary, Marie, had secretly been planning this event, and so we walked into the American Club, and there were 60 guests there waiting for us. And at the office that day, I decided to work a little later that evening. Well, we had a 4-story building across from Buckingham Palace, and all the employees and our architect consultants gathered there to change clothes. Well, I wouldn't go home, so they were all upstairs where the guest rooms were, waiting for me to leave so they could change clothes. Finally, I went home, put on my tux, and they got dressed, and the party was going well when they got there. It was a beautiful party. We had presentations, and it was JoAnn's birthday also. She got flowers and a cake, and they had a Prince Charles impersonator there that roasted me, and I had lots of fun rebutting and so forth. And we've got memories in a picture book of all of them, and it's a beautiful affair. But we came home in '88. We sent our furniture back in October. So we moved from the Barbican, our nice flat in the Barbican, we moved to a flat up by Harrods. And I had tried to keep JoAnn away from Harrods when we picked our first apartment. That was the notorious shopping conglomeration there. And so we moved right next door to it. And fortunately, we went to Spain for a couple of weeks there, or a week and 10 days. And so she didn't get to spend all of her money, but then she came home, and I think October 15th, and I came home in a couple weeks later and wrapped up things and had decided But previous to that, we had a new arrival in our family. Amy Elizabeth arrived in '88. She was our first grandchild, and we came back for her birthing and saw Doug and Jill perform, and we welcomed the blessed event and beautiful granddaughter. We really cherished her, and we had a great time. But I made 36 trips back and forth from England in those 4 years. We came home often. I had meetings, and so we were used to doing a lot of traveling, and it was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful experience. In fact, we wouldn't have anything to talk about today if it wasn't for living in England, I guess. We had, I think, 153 guests came over to see us, and I even had a college friend that I hadn't seen for 40 years. He showed up, and we had several couples that stayed with us, and then we had friends of Joy's and Jill's that came over, and so we had a great time, and we were there at the right time too, and things worked out well. We met some nice friends through church, and had some wonderful experiences. While we were in England, and Jill was expecting Amy, she would send us a monthly profile. And we had a couple sonar shots of Amy in her mother's tummy, and that was enlightening. So when we came back for her birth, that was very exciting. Shortly after, my mother passed on, and my brother, while we were in England, and we came back for their services. And then shortly after, we came back permanently. And I went back into my architectural practice, London Balderson. Things had changed a little, but I had 3 projects, football offices, expansion at Kansas State, and bank for Overland Park, UMB, and a building for the city of Overland Park. And after 2 years of trying to resume my practice, I just gave thought to retiring. So when I was 64, I retired, and have enjoyed my retirement ever since. A lot of things to do in retirement, and I've enjoyed it. I'm involved in a few things. I served on, I had previously been on the Planning Commission in Prairie Village and Leawood, and And then I was asked to be on the Johnson County Planning Commission, which took time, but I enjoyed that. But I was involved with Rotary, and then I was invited to join the Vanguard Club, which is a great organization. It's not a service club, they do nothing. They were named after a satellite that didn't do anything, that used to go around the world. But it's a group of fellas that are kind of movers and shakers in Kansas City, and ex-mayors, and I had several good friends in there, so they asked me to join that, which I did. It's an early morning breakfast club. Average age is probably 75, 76. But last year I was president, and the president's term is for 6 months. I mean, they knew you couldn't take it for a full year, and it's quite an experience. We have excellent programs, and we have 2 or 3 black tie parties a year for the wives. But when I was president, I think we lost 5 or 6 members. But when I finished my term, they gave me a piece of luggage, and I think it meant get out of town. But they gave me a certificate that said, in keeping with tradition of the Vanguard Club, you were the worst president we ever had. And I enjoyed that. We had 2 great grandsons that joined our family. Scott Douglas Lackey and Brett James, who was named after Doug's father, James Benton Lackey, and C. James Balderson. And they've been, I don't know, the light of my life, kind of. We used to have them come down for, each one of them by themselves for a week here at Cedar Creek, and Amy joined them also, or would come down. And we had some wonderful experiences. And they grow up, and they're busy doing things now, but it's great to follow what they're doing as far as baseball, football, and soccer. And they're nice kids. I'm looking forward to them becoming outstanding gentlemen. And Amy is a beautiful young lady. She's grown so much in our eyes, and we've really enjoyed her. But been wonderful. We had some Florida vacations together as a family, and that was nice. And Doug and Jill work hard to keep their family and to do all the things for their kids, and I think the results are very good. They should be, as we are, very proud of them. And if we can just get them to K-State, we'll be doing all right, but I don't know. My former partner, George Lund, had a lovely retirement party for me in '91, and invited a lot of old friends and employees and clients and so forth, and it was a wonderful experience. I got a chance to say goodbye and tell them how I enjoyed working for them, maybe some exceptions. But it was a nice party, and then surprise of the party was Jill came waltzing in, and we hadn't expected her to join us. I was very surprised, and even gave her 2 pieces of cake. Oh. But it was a wonderful event, and it was a lot of fun. That's what life's all about, seeing friends and having fun. We had the most delightful anniversary party that Doug and Jill gave for us up at our club, and the 3 kids came down. Amy just came down for a Sunday just to be there, and of course Scott and Brett helped me put up some signs, and Doug and Jill did a wonderful job of welcoming all our guests, and we had old friends and neighbors and friends of Jill's and college friends and high school and friends of Joy's, and so it was a great festivity. We got lots of well wishes and cards and few gifts and so forth. But it was a great day. I really enjoyed it. And JoAnn was very pleased. We had our friend Bert Bates. He got up and gave a toast, and it turned into more of a eulogy than, but he did a magnificent job. He's an attorney, and he was very eloquent, and his wife was unable to join us. She had a health problem, but Bert did well, and I thanked him profusely, and had members of the Vanguard there, members of the Chi Omega. We had some Kappa Delts there, and it was just a great occasion. And we really thank Doug and Jill for taking care of us and our friends.
You feel that way too.
Well, you have to have good credit at the bank, and tolerance, patience, and love, and understanding of each other. And in my case, it takes a lot of all three. And no, I was blessed to have a gifted and loving wife like JoAnn. And I hope my next wife will be as gracious. I think we did a lot of things that perhaps, I won't say normal people, but average people didn't do. I mean, we took off and went to England. We had our family, and that worked out pretty well.
Grew up dreaming.
Willie Nelson, I admire him and his music, and On the Road Again. He's a great American icon. We went to a Willie Nelson concert, and I went down in front, paid $10 and went down in front and got to stand with all the young people. And I threw my K-State cap up there, and he threw his dirty old cap at me, and I got that downstairs on our moose. And no, I enjoyed him. But I also enjoy music, and I like, my favorites are Errol Garner and Stan Kenton and Count Basie, and all beautiful people that their music will live on, and that's what's important. Glenn Mueller, you often wonder about Glenn Miller, if he had survived, what his music, he had such an effect on American music in the short time he was with us, that I wonder what would happen afterwards. Great musician. We had some very good friends, Trish and Ian Bell. Ian Bell worked for me, and he was an outstanding person. He managed 40 projects for me at one time, and unbelievable. He used to keep me out of trouble. He would write letters to the British and do it in the proper way and so forth. But we went back over to England. In fact, we took the grandkids, or they took us to England, and Doug and Jill, and we went over there for a week with them, and then we stayed on for another week and visited some English friends. And Ian Bell and Trish invited us to this concert, a Glenn Miller concert, and it was a beautiful happening. The English have these great, what they call rug parties, where you take your blanket and you go out and have picnics and all that. But this particular one was held in Fountains Abbey, which was an old abandoned abbey that had been demolished many years ago. And they had a portable dance floor, and Glenn Miller and his band was there, or Glenn Miller's band was there, and his nephew Herbie was the director. And we went there and took our hampers and walked across the fields to the Abbey, and they had wine and cheese and all sorts of food, and then you have to rent your table. So you rent the table and you fill it with all the goodies, and there were several hundred people there, and it was costume party, World War II. So a lot of them were dressed up like American soldiers and sailors and British officers and nurses, and there was one guy was dressed up like Hitler and another like a Japanese, and it was awe-inspiring. I mean, just seeing. I took pictures of a lot of them, and it was fun. And so the band played, and then the first intermission was over, and we're sitting there at the table enjoying the food and beverages, and this gentleman comes by in an American Army uniform, and he stops and he leans down to JoAnn and he said, "Did you like our music?" And JoAnn says, "Who are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm Herbie Miller, the band director, Glenn Miller's nephew." "Oh," he said, "I've been beating my brains out there for an hour and a half and you don't know who I am?" And then they had a nice conversation, and he was very cordial. He had moved there with his mother from the United States, and he had been there for a couple of years running the band. And so he started off the second half, and he said, "I'm dedicating this first tune to the lady from the Kansas who didn't know who I was." And JoAnn thought that was funny. Then at the end of the program, I mean, they went through their whole repertoire of Glenn Miller songs, and at the end they simulated a bombing, and they had explosions and fireworks, and they had searchlights, and they had sirens, and they had simulated aircraft sounds and so forth. And it was a beautiful, beautiful party. We really enjoyed that. And we have other friends from the UK, that Dennis Mankey and his girlfriend. We used to do things with he and his wife and family. And Dennis has been over here twice, and his daughter Tiffany's been over here a couple of times. So we have friends that come see us. And Dennis gave me that Bobby's hat, and he sent me a cricket cap last week. And they send me bottles of lime water, which is kind of an aftershave. So every morning when I get up, I think of the Mankeys when I'm sprinkling up and so forth. And one of those bottles lasts about 2 years. So. Uh-oh. What makes me tick? Oh, I think I'm inquisitive, and I'm a person that likes to follow up and try and get things done. I'm noted for having a lot of unfinished projects, but they all unfold. I think I like to achieve things and reflect creative mind. I think that's been very important to me, to have the extra sense or the extra determination. And now, come here.
Yeah, pick them up.
Here. Here is Darby. 22 pounds of Scottish thoroughbred with a banged up ear. This guy is more fun for us, and he's my buddy. We walk, and I feed him and bathe him and everything. And he's JoAnn's boyfriend, though. He's fickle. But he's a loving dog, and we really love him. This is a $275 dog that we've got $5,000 invested in. You're worth every cent. And no, he's a beautiful animal. And we really have fun with him, don't we? You think so, Darb? He's so oblivious to what's going on. He's a smart dog. He's stubborn. He has a lot of virtues and aspects of me. He's stubborn and good looking, and keeps moving. But he used to, when he was a small puppy, he used to sleep in my tum-tum in this chair. And now he's doesn't do that anymore, but we have a lot of fun. You're awful quiet, Darby. Yes. This is Aaron McDuff, Darby Balderson. Is that right? And Scotties are highly intelligent dogs. They're very stubborn at times, but loyal. I had an accident a few weeks ago. I slipped and fell on a mossy sidewalk. It kind of banged me up, and I was walking Darby, and he came, kind of nudged me. I was lying in the water there and kind of stunned for several minutes, and he came over and was nudging me, and then he got up with his paws and stood over me. And a friend of mine went by, a couple friends, and they called Medac, and they took me over to the hospital there. But Darby was protecting me. Weren't you, Darby? Amy is our first grandchild, and she's a bright, beautiful girl that we enjoy watching mature, and we don't necessarily perhaps understand some of the things she's going through, but we know that with her family and love and so forth, that she'll achieve her goals. And big oak trees from little acorns grow, I guess you might say. Scott, he's a very diversified young person, and he accepts challenges. He's a hard worker and very competitive. And as he gets older, it'll be quite rewarding to see him and what he's able to do. And I think he's going to be a very successful person, whatever he undertakes. Brett. Brett's kind of laid back, and he kind of picks and chooses, and he kind of marches to his own drum, and he's another person that I think will surprise people, because he seems to have endurance, and he seems to have some inner goals that like he's trying out for football and so forth, and he may seem to be a little guy and may not be the best athlete, but I think he has determination, and that'll develop abilities and so forth. So I think Brett's a sleeper, and I think he seems to get along well with everyone, and has a very good personality. Jill, very accomplished, surprising some of the things she's been able to do, and but with her artistic qualities and opportunities, I think she's been very successful. I think she's a good mother and wife. She was when she lived under our roof, we had trying times, but we all don't understand each other. But it's what happens at the end of the day that counts. And Jill's done a wonderful job. We're very proud of her.
What's it like? Like nothing else in this whole world. It's just so different. He's so much fun, and yet he's so serious. And, he's just made me very happy. I'm very fortunate. He's a great guy, and I'm going to cry. And we had two wonderful girls. That was the most important part. And now we have these grandchildren. It makes your life worthwhile.
My dad was a lot of fun. He has a great sense of humor, and there were lots of times where I didn't know if he was telling the truth or not. He would say something, and I'd always ask my mom, "Is that true?" And most of the times it was true, but since he had such a sense of humor, I could never tell if it was a tall tale or a true story. So, my dad, it was fun growing up. When I was young, high school, I wasn't the greatest daughter, so that was kind of a trying time, but once I went away to college, I appreciated him and my mom a lot more, and we've become good friends. My dad has a lot of great qualities. He's very loving, he's got a big heart, he's very generous. He puts everyone else before himself, always. Just a very caring, very kind man. Well, I don't know, thank him for all the nice qualities that he has given to me. And thank him for a nice childhood. And thank him for being such a great grandfather to my three. Well, I think my dad gave me some of his good qualities. I think I'm a kind and caring person. I also have a big heart. I put other people always before myself. He's also given me a lot of artistic qualities, which I enjoy. And he's a very generous person. I think I am too.
I'm not one to step up to the bat and tell people what to do and so forth, because my trip to glory was kind of spasmodic at times, but I think wisdom, I think you should achieve to do the best you can and assimilate and reach out and seize the moment and accept opportunities, and that's what I tried to do on occasion. And the main thing is not to be discouraged and accept support and guidance from other people, because you don't know it all, and everything people can put forward to you, I mean, it's going to help you in most cases. Sometimes you'll get some bad advice, but that's for you to weigh and run with. I've been motivated, I think, by the kids I went to high school with. I told you that in our football team there was 5 doctors and 2 lawyers and 2 architects and 2 veterinarians, and but all those people were successful, and they did it because they worked hard. And I think that's important. If you have a talent or you have genes that are given to you, I think it helps you to be successful in life. And that's what life's all about. The main thing is to lighten up and enjoy what you're doing. And I've tried to do that.
trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly, and the dream that you dare to, oh why can't I?
What makes me tick? Fat lady, bearded lady, giant, midgets, all the usual sideshow attractions.